we're all very ambitious people. And so we are like, oh, we should be doing more and we don't have enough members. And then to be able to like compare ourselves to the other states and be like, okay, we're still new. And
I do sometimes think about the fact that in the greater Orlando area, there's like 30,000 short-term rentals.
Yeah.
And in the entire state of Michigan, we're at like 34,000, the entire state.
Yeah. Yeah. We're little babies
Yeah.
in comparison to some of those markets. Okay, welcome back, everyone, to the next episode of KarWell Chronicles. I'm your host, Sarah, and this is my co-host,
Emily. I thought you were going to say I'm Emily. Like, I literally thought you were
my
going to say...
brain glitched for 2 seconds, and I almost said Emily, so...
Whatever, same thing.
Today we have some super special guests on the podcast with us. If you have been watching my Instagram stories on KarWell's at all, talking about all the regulation issues that I have dealt with over the last 2 years, I am not siloed in that experience whatsoever. And so we have a MiSTRA here, which is Michigan STR Association, to talk through kind of how they've organized themselves, how you guys can get involved, why it's relevant to you as a short-term rental host in the state of Michigan. And so we're just going to kind of get elbows deep in that today. So why don't you guys start out by introducing yourselves and you know, a blip of your experience with short-term rentals, and then we can kind of get into MiSTRA and what it's about and how people can get involved.
Sure. I'm Kate Stormer. I have the privilege of being one of the founding members, actually, of MiSTRA, which is the Michigan Short-Term Rental Association, which is a nonprofit association. It's a trade association, so we're driven by our membership. And I actually had a 27-year career in clinical research. I don't know how I got here as an administrator, but no, actually I do know. And I was always interested in real estate investing, and I got when I started working remote, and my husband worked remote, I was like, we could travel the world. My husband's like, I have to work, and I'm not lugging a laptop. I'm like, okay, well, what about a second home?
Yeah.
And so we bought a house fully intending to rent it out as a short-term rental, and that's our second home. We still own it. We have a second one now as well. But all of that fell into this just adventure of I bought into a mentorship. I became a side hustled as a coach in that mentorship. And then people were asking me to coach them, because that program didn't teach self-management. So then they had me teaching them self-management. And then all of that just kind of blossomed and turned into me being a coaching consultant over at the CEO Host. And I'm literally coaching people from Hawaii to Puerto Rico to Maine to all over the country over the course of about 3 years. And I'm like, but I don't hardly work with people in Michigan. And I'm always excited when somebody calls because I live in Ann Arbor. Mm-hmm. And so I looked around for an organization to get involved with and began to, and that was the Rental Property Owners Association that had at the time had a strong involvement with the short-term rental piece, which they don't really have that anymore. Mm-hmm. And began to get to know some folks in Michigan, which has been really fun. And since then I was able to quit my 9-to-5 3 years ago this month.
Congratulations.
And it's awesome to, as I know, having that time freedom, even though it's busy, to be able to do what I want with my time when I need to for the family and for all that. So it's been awesome. Yeah.
I love that. Similar story of just really wanting to get out of your 9-to-5. I love that so many of us have that in common. So go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Katy Bertodato, based in Traverse City, Michigan. I own Golden Swan Management and started this in 2016. I was previously in long-term management and decided to give the short-term gig a try when Airbnb was really blowing up. So rented out the other half of my duplex. It allowed me to stay in Central neighborhood, which is a pretty, expensive neighborhood in Traverse City, and raise my 2 boys as a single mom. So that's how I started. It was my side gig, and then kind of similar to what Kate was saying, people start contacting you and asking for consulting or management. So got licensed, realized that was the thing, and then at some point realized if I took on one more contract, I was going to have to hire people. So it was turn people away or actually take this seriously and hire people. So that's what I did. And now I've got, we manage about 75 properties in Northern Michigan. We're pretty careful about who we bring into our portfolio. And I've got an amazing team of like 22 people who just bust it.
Incredible.
And we have a lot of fun. Short term is a lot more fun than long term because ultimately people leave at some point, which is great.
Yeah, they come, they party hard, and they leave.
Yeah, exactly. And then I got involved in MiSTRA. I had actually contacted Kate a few years ago. I had seen her as the CEO host and said, hey, like, we need some sort of association. What are you doing? What's going on? And then we kind of parted ways a little bit. We couldn't, I think you were.
At the time, I was pretty newly involved with the RPOA.
Right.
And so I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, they're doing stuff. And so it was really when they, like a year later, they were like, okay, well, we're, no longer going to have this short-term rental committee, and we're not really going to be doing much with short-term rental. And so.
Yeah, so then she was working with Jen at the time through RPOA. They found each other. And then so Kate contacted me and was like, basically, I know you're a policy nerd. And this is like, this is what we're doing. Do you want to join? And I said, yeah, as long as I can kind of stick with the legislative side of things, because that's what I'm doing anyway. I'm down in Lansing or at these tiny municipalities, these township meetings, advocating, trying to advocate. It's like whack-a-mole all across the state. It's a lot. I know that you guys know.
Yeah, we are loud and clear on that. Well, Carrie, go ahead.
Okay, I wedged myself into this podcast.
We love that.
So I'm Carrie Dreyer. I'm also in the Traverse City area, and I have Roost North Rentals. We're turning 10 this summer. We have 9 properties that we own and manage. And yeah, I just really, in the last couple of years, wanted to be more involved. I started having kind of a really good community with the short-term rental owners, but a lot of them were not in my area. And not in Michigan. And then Kate and Jen found me somehow and started talking to me.
You spoke at a conference.
Yes, I did speak at a conference. Yeah. Okay. And after at the happy hour, they kind of started dropping hints that they were forming something, and they would get back a hold of me and contacted me. And so I'm one of the founding board members of MiSTRA. And we actually formed when I was on spring break last March, April. Signed the documents. So it's been a whirlwind. I can't believe it's been a year already. But it's been really great to not feel alone in the fight for things, because I do feel like we were all fighting. Like even Katy and I, alongside in Traverse City in 2017, knew of each other, but we were sort of like
Just
fighting separately, trying to do our own thing. So it's just really exciting opportunity for us to like come together.
It was cool when we formed too, like our first official board meeting, just to see a panel of badass women. Just like, let's, if we want to get things done, this is the way to do it. And yeah, a year later, I really do feel like we're getting it done.
Yeah.
I love that. I was going to ask, is there like because we talk about regulation with MiSTRA all the time. So is there like a thing that happened that you were like, okay, now we need to have this association? Or were you just trying to be proactive because you were like, okay, there's nothing here, let's do it? Or did something happen to regulation at one of your properties and you're like, oh gosh?
Actually, it was the state level bill that was proposed. I mean, it was both the little bit of representation we had through the Rental Property Owners Association was pulled back. So that was.
Why was that pulled back?
I don't know that I can really answer that. They went through a big strategic planning, and they were like, short term, long term,
Different
flipping.
animals.
Like they just felt like we want to represent all those things, and short term is like getting all this special attention. So we're just going to pull it back into the fold. And I think they still talk about it occasionally, but like I feel like it really is a different beast. Yeah. And I had no interest in sitting through discussions about buying notes when what we really needed to be talking about was all this regulation that was impacting us.
Yeah.
But when we formed, literally at the beginning of 2024 was, a package of 10 bills was introduced in the state of Michigan at the state level that was going to, increase our taxes. It was going to create a state level registry. It was going to not really return, like it was going to increase taxes, but not really return money back to the community that we're in, which is a big thing for us. And, it had some safety language in there that was really not appropriate for a residential single-family home. And so it was kind of both of those things. And literally we formed, and then last April, once we formed, like the policy folks at Vrbo and Airbnb found us because we help them too, right? So they were like, okay, you need to show up at the State House on this day. And, we need to bring, hosts and, so we spent most of 2024 like getting ourselves figured out, but also doing that legislative piece.
Yeah.
Like trading time in Lansing. I feel like you guys went down and then I went down and
Yeah, I think, part of that package of bills that was introduced is something that they were really bragging about in Lansing was we brought all the stakeholders to the table, all the stakeholders were like, except us.
Yeah.
The ones that you're literally regulating and taxing, there was zero representation. And so that's when we were like, we need to get loud. We need to make sure that they know who we are.
Yeah.
And, we're happy to help build legislation, but you got to give us a seat at the table. So, we really had to kind of battle for that.
Yeah.
I thought it was really impactful, like going with you guys when we went to Lansing and we spoke with our representatives. Because to be honest, I'm just not plugged in to like anything at the state level or any legislation. When we buy our short-term rentals, we call the township or the city or the county and we're like, hey, is this cool? And if they tell us yes or no, and that's really the extent of like how deep I've gone into it previously. But then going there and actually talking to my representative like opened my eyes to how much more involved I needed to be. So how often do you run into people who are like, no, I didn't even know that was a thing that was happening? Because when I went to my planning commission meeting, I was the only host who showed up, and there's hundreds of short-term rentals in my market. So how often are you running into people that just have no idea that they need to even be involved?
Often. And I would say a lot of times it's when it's like the final hearing or the final decision, the board is taking a vote in like whatever community this is in, and that's when people are like, whoa, wait, we had no idea this was going on. We're trying really hard to stay ahead of it, but we need for people to let us know what's going on in their communities and early, because we're not magicians, we can't like swoop in at the end and just tell people what to do for their community.
Right.
We have to try to work with them from the beginning and not wait until it gets to the 0 hour.
And like Kate said, we're a nonprofit board, and we're a working board right now, and we're still small, and that's part of the reason why we want to represent Michigan better with more hosts from different areas, because we are really represented right now in Traverse City really well. So we can kind of keep a handle on that. But a lot of times they're not notifying you properly when they're going to talk about short-term rentals. That's what we want to be, is have that voice so that people, the first thought is like, okay, I've got to alert MiSTRA to this.
Yeah.
Become
the first
a member
rumbling
and then
of
let
it.
us know.
Yeah.
Although non-members let us know too, right?
Non-members
People
do
will
let us.
just DM us, with information. But if we think about it, there are 1,773 different municipalities in the state.
Oh my God.
I love that you know that.
So that is 1,773 different localities that can choose to define and regulate short-term rentals.
Yeah.
So even if, 20% of them are regulating, that's a lot of municipalities. That's a lot of different regulations. So a big impetus. So, I went to, my MBA, I focused on organizational management. And so I understand, and this is sort of how I push us as a team, is that we're going to wear ourselves out if we try to keep showing up. And I think your point of like, not everybody knows this is happening. So we're being really thoughtful about how do we structure ourselves to support communication from those municipalities to the people who can actually help, and how do we empower people to help themselves? Because there's no way that we can cover all of that. So we definitely want to cover the state.
Yeah, like just for example, just up north, I'm double booked every night this week with different township meetings.
Woo.
Yeah,
I believe it.
And we're a working board. We're not getting paid, so I've got like 15 plus hours of unpaid work scheduled.
Yeah.
I'm tired. Join MiSTRA. Help us out. Right? Help us help you.
That is not maybe the most.
Right.
We're gonna overwork you.
All right, let's take a break from the episode to shout out one of our sponsors, Minoan. Are you running a short-term rental? You know how important it is to create a space that's both stunning and functional. That's why we love Minoan. Minoan makes it easy to furnish and restock your rental with high-quality, stylish pieces from premium brands at up to 60% off. Plus, their centralized ordering lets you check out across multiple brands in one seamless cart. No stress, no hassle. Excuse me, only having one place to look for my receipts when my bookkeeper inevitably asks for them? Thank you, Minoan. Then, turn guest praise into profit with the digital showroom where you can showcase your design expertise and allow your guests to shop their stay. And the best part, Minoan is free to use, so you can elevate your space without breaking the bank. We use Minoan ourselves, and trust us, it's a game changer. All right, let's get back to the episode.
But I think that, but as we grow and as we create the systems where we have, a way and we can flag, because a lot of times these small communities, I just went to, Dexter Township outside of Ann Arbor actually made national news last fall because a couple bought a house. Their realtor told them they could short-term rent it, and then they found out they couldn't, and so they were trying to use the media to help garner, and it worked. So they're having township meetings to talk about it, but then you show up at the township meeting, and they don't really know what the issues are, right? And we're spending 20 minutes talking about riparian laws and whether or not a guest can put a boat on a dock versus the real issues behind short-term renting and the real tools that are available to townships to be able to do it. And that's, that's just people being people, right? Like, we live and breathe this stuff, and we understand what the issues and where the risks are, and that risk mitigation needs to be the question, and that, that the only reason to put a cap in place is because you've actually studied the question of housing and primary versus secondary residences and things like that. But, so a lot of times it is very sort of rudimentary concepts that we want to be able to provide people the tools so that they can take those into their townships and that they can be empowered themselves rather than trying to show up everywhere.
Because a lot of these townships don't know. I know that you're going through this, Emily. Like, they just don't know where to start. It feels very overwhelming. And we want to be like you did for your short-term rental community, and hopefully they thank you later as you're helping them guide them towards reasonable regulation. Yeah. But that's not happening everywhere. Like, if you didn't show up, they wouldn't have anyone. So they're just trying to see what everyone else is doing. So we want to be the ones that they actually seek us out, or we can come to them and help that. And I do want to point on that we are for reasonable regulations from MiSTRA. So we want to be able to show them that we are good hosts, and we want to continue to be good hosts. And we also don't agree with hosts that are not following those rules. And I think that helps build the trust for the townships as well.
Common sense regulation, right? And let's make some data-driven decisions instead of fear-based or just based on emotion. So we're going in there and trying to encourage them to, maybe look at this a little bit differently, look at our industry as one that is professional, because we've all been doing this a long time. We take pride in our work. And, we're happy to work with communities to make sure that we're contributing to the economy in a positive way.
Yeah.
We care about our communities. Like, we live or spend time in our communities. And so we also want to make sure that, and I think that gets sort of weaponized sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially with housing shortages and cost of living. And
Airbnb has become a blanket, issue or like Band-Aid, I guess, for a lot of issues. But I know that that's something that I've picked up on is like in all of the township and city meetings that I've been to over the last year and a half, it's so exhausting for the cities and townships to develop which direction they're going on short-term rentals, whether they're going to ban them or whether they're going to regulate them or put proper zoning in place for them or whatever the case may be, that by the time they get to making that decision, they're now exhausted and don't want to really understand the nuances to develop rules around their new regulation. And so we're seeing that in Cadillac where they're like, okay, well, it's allowed in these zones. But then when it comes time to get the permit, they're like, okay, what rules are you following? And they're like, you're going to have to tell us because we don't know the first thing about Airbnbs. And so I'm like, I feel like that for me in working with you guys and beginning to understand what you guys do and what the importance of this association is kind of streamlining that process for cities because of the amount of hours that they don't want to spend learning the nuances of an industry that they know nothing about.
Yeah, I had to go in and basically tell them all of the different software that we could use, the type of insurance that we could get. They knew nothing about any of it. And they were so thankful that I had introduced them to any of those concepts. But then the zoning administrator comes up to me after and she was like, I really appreciate you doing this and we want to figure something out, but I'm the one who has to enforce this. So I have no idea what we're going to do. She's like, I don't have any time to enforce anything on anybody. So I have no clue what the solution is. And I was like, I mean, I'm happy to be like a resource for you, but like, I don't even know what to do. So it's like super beneficial to have like associations like you guys to come in. But again, you guys are all worn so thin that you need more people.
We're definitely heading in the right direction. You know, our membership is growing really every day. Like every time we get out and do something like this, people are like, oh, you exist. And we're like, yeah, and we're here to help.
Yeah.
So just let us know what's going on and we'll help.
Yeah.
Well, and I think part of it too is, again, some of these are not hard issues to talk about, right? Like, I have seen townships spin their wheels on how do you even technically define a short-term rental, right? So there's some bottom line. So if we can cut through, if we can help cut through. So we've been working on just sort of model ordinances, and you know, if you're Traverse City or South Haven or Grand Haven, you know, your challenges are going to look different than if you're Alpena or if you're St. Ignace or if you're Royal Oak, right? But those profiles, if you will, those travel and tourism profiles and how that plays out as a short-term rental are fairly similar. But one of the bad habits we've seen is they'll just borrow the neighbor's ordinance with no thought about how it actually works for them or whether or not it's even legal, right?
Preach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, I don't want to throw shade because I think you put your thumb on the pulse of it is like they're typically exhausted. They're dealing with a lot. And this tends to be an issue that gets a few people really riled up.
Yep.
Right. And so they're dealing with people who are on speed dial calling up to complain every other day.
Yep.
Right. And so I have a lot of sympathy for that. Nobody wants to deal with that. And, you know, so, and we think about that now because if we're talking townships, I'm like, listen, you need to put something in about spurious complaints too, because when you've got a neighbor who just doesn't like that they're next door to a short-term rental and they keep calling you and it's and nobody's breaking the rules, like that's draining resources too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think just using the plays that you have in place already. You know, if your city has a noise ordinance, then call the cops if someone's violating that. Like, you know, I want to know if my guests are violating that in some way. But instead, they're calling the zoning administrator, which is such a bizarre move to me. Like, that would not be my first thought, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think they get an idea of who actually is making the decision and they want to be the squeaky wheel so bad to that person. Because I've had that in all three of the, you know, regulation issues that I'm dealing with is there is like one or two people in the community that feel some type of way that just bulldoze the person who's making the decision. And it results in that person just being like, I just want this person who's bulldozing my time to stop, you know, and they're not as motivated to actually fight a good fight for this industry because they don't have a short-term rental. They're just like, all of a sudden there's this big issue that's taking up a ton of my time that wasn't before and now is. And so, yeah, it's an exhausting battle. I do have a question though. I mean, when people are dealing with this type of an issue, like when is the best time for them to reach out? What would be the most helpful information that they could bring to you guys in saying like, hey, my township's starting to talk about these things? Like in a best case scenario, if you could have people get involved, what does that channel look like?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, for me, I would love to know right away that the conversation is starting. Like, we should know right away. And then we want whatever community that's in, you gather your community of people. Mm-hmm. And, like, you have a spokesperson. We're a resource. You know, we can't carry the torch to, like, at every single one of these. Mm-hmm. So use this as a resource. But if we show up right away and we know that that's happening, before they start drafting an ordinance and spend all of this taxpayer dollars and time to try to do that, we can say, hey, here's what's kind of going in other communities. This is what's working. This is how to keep it simple so that you can actually enforce it. Mm-hmm. Because they start going down these roads where they're creating all of these different rules. But if it's not enforceable, what are we doing?
Right.
That doesn't make sense. So
You just end up punishing good hosts.
Yeah. So early as possible, so that we can kind of contact the zoning administrator and be a resource for them and show them, like when we walk into a room, we want to make sure that we're lowering the temperature a little bit.
Yeah.
And not just showing up with torches and pitchforks, because these people on these boards, I mean, we've served on boards like this before too. I've had to make zoning decisions too. It's like they're humans. Mm-hmm. So let's just try to give them as much data as we can to make good decisions and just empower them to do that, while also supporting our membership, because, you know, every once in a while you do kind of come across somebody who's a little bullheaded or really thinks that they know better than anyone else, and we just need to be at the table together figuring it out.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I do think that like the cities do have a ton of hosts that are coming in with pitchforks and trying to raise the temperature. You know, it was like there was no, at least in my experience in dealing with short-term rental hosts versus city council members, it is not a like, let's figure this out together narrative. It's like the short-term rental hosts feel like they're being attacked right away, and then they go and attack the city council. And so it just escalates so quickly, and it just becomes like the least professional thing in the entire world. And I think that that's it from my perspective. The most importance of MiSTRA is like professionalizing this industry, because professionals want to do business with other professionals, not with a bunch of side hustlers. And so there's this big side hustle mentality in the short-term rental space that I think is the overall perspective from the city council members as well. And so they're like, you know, these people are just out here like trying to do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. And they think that that then plays a role in how we run our businesses as well. And so they don't realize that we have all of these like rules and regulations and processes set in place for it to not be an issue for our neighbors, and that there are professional hosts. And so they're just like, you know, we want to be done with this completely. And so I do see that like you guys coming in earlier than later would definitely de-escalate the situation.
Yeah. We just want to educate.
Yeah. And going off of that, I just want to take, because regulation is such a huge thing, but I do want to talk about that we do also want to build a community, and we throw events. We have virtual events. So it's not always bogged down with regulation, even though that does seem to take a lot of our time. But we do focus on educating our hosts too. We have a lot of different things that we do based on if you are a brand new host. Kate has some programming that she does around that, and resources to breakouts on our virtual, where you could be like, hey, now I want to grow my business, so I'm going to talk to people that are also growing my business, or I want to be in this side discussion with people that are growing a property management, or I don't want to grow and I'm just going to double down on what I have. And that's kind of the stage I'm in right now. So being able to connect with those people, but then knowing other hosts in your community, so that when things like this happen, you can get together quickly and form quickly too. But I did want to focus a little bit on like the fun side of it too, because we do have a lot of fun. And we just had a meetup after the Michigan Short-Term Rental Conference at the Downtown Market in Grand Rapids, and we talked a little bit about updates of what's happening, but a lot of it was just connection with people. I don't know, did you guys get to meet anyone new?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, a lot of familiar faces, but also new faces.
All right, let's take a break from the episode to shout out one of our sponsors, Minoan. Are you running a short-term rental? You know how important it is to create a space that's both stunning and functional. That's why we love Minoan. Minoan makes it easy to furnish and restock your rental with high-quality, stylish pieces from premium brands at up to 60% off. Plus, their centralized ordering lets you check out across multiple brands in one seamless cart. No stress, no hassle. Excuse me, only having one place to look for my receipts when my bookkeeper inevitably asks for them? Thank you, Minoan. Then, turn guest praise into profit with the digital showroom, where you can showcase your design expertise and allow your guests to shop their stay. And the best part, Minoan is free to use, so you can elevate your space without breaking the bank. We use Minoan ourselves, and trust us, it's a game changer. All right, let's get back to the episode.
But I guess that brings up my next question. I mean, what's kind of MiSTRA's all-encompassing thing here? Because obviously we're trying to professionalize to a certain degree for regulation, for a seat at the table at the state level. But like, when you think about MiSTRA as a whole, what's kind of the vision of what it encompasses?
Yeah, so when we envisioned MiSTRA, it was really about just elevating the industry in our state and being plugged in nationally. And so I'll speak to the national part first. So we are allied with an organization called Rent Responsibly, and they actually both provide services to associations like us, both at the state level and you can form, a local association as well. So they provide services in terms of helping us just with the nuts and bolts of being an association, but also connecting us. So last May, Jen and I, we went to a retreat with other national leaders in the short-term rental industry, and we're able to hear about what's going on in other states and in other communities and how they're doing that. And I think that is an invaluable tool because understanding what's going on, and in some cases, being part of that national landscape is really helpful, and in gathering ideas and sharing ideas and troubleshooting with my peers in the industry, right? Locally, we really have that tripartite mission of education, advocacy, and networking. And so, it's really about being the platform for people to come and just find each other. And I think Carrie did a beautiful job of sort of explaining. I mean, we really do have, we have, property management company with upwards of hundreds of properties. And we have people who haven't yet purchased their first one who are learning. And we shouldn't forget about all of the associated businesses that are impacted by short-term rentals, cleaners, lawn care, all of those things, right? So we also have business partners that we work with as well. So our vision is really just to be that platform. Certainly in 2024, and as we move on, each of those areas really has we've defined a strategy and some strategic goals around that. So legislatively that we really want to be, we don't just want to get invited to the table. We actually want to start putting the guest list together and start putting those goals together for what should it look like if we're going to legislate at the state level.
Yeah. Taking a more proactive approach instead of reacting. It would be nice this time around.
And then education, that's probably one of our biggest strengths is we do a virtual meetup. We're a big state, right? So just a lot of stomping ground to cover. So we have virtual meetups. We'll have our first virtual summit in the fall, and that will be our, for our bylaws, we need to make sure we have a member meeting, and we'll have a vote on specific things with our membership, and then but we're also going to have sort of a larger event, and we're going to do that virtually. We might do an in-person component to that. We're still trying to figure out. I mean, it's a big state. Like, how do you, make all those things work?
In the middle of the state.
Right.
Well, and that's what we're also starting to do, and we've started in Traverse City is did we land on community hubs?
Yeah.
Community hubs. So obviously virtual, but then having this local space that we can actually meet up in person, because it is really hard. As a state, I feel like other states maybe don't understand that it's like, yes, it might be 4 hours. 4 hours feels like a lifetime away for us.
Yeah,
like
it's not
between
expressway
Detroit
4 hours.
Traverse City, where other people might drive in California or something and not think that that's a big deal. So for us, we're starting that small, but hope that we can expand that so that we can have that in-person component as well, and still get a better handle on the businesses that support short-term rentals. Like Kate touched on, that is really huge for us because I do feel like it's easy to focus on the negative. But I have so many businesses that I love to support and support me right back. And even in this last week, I had multiple of them saying, like, we love you, we're glad you're here, and we want to continue to work with you. You bring so much business to us. And so it's been really cool to see businesses spend their money to be part of our organization, even without having a short-term rental. And that really helps us because eventually we don't want to be a working board.
Right.
We want to have staff. We want to, we want to be able to have a lobbyist. We want to be able to have all of these things and grow into this much bigger organization. And just like the reality of that is you need money.
It's nice to be recognized in our communities for the economic impact that we have there, and having them support us, as much as we're supporting them. The monthly meetups are pretty awesome. I think we've had nothing but positive feedback from our membership saying how valuable that information is. And they're pretty fun. We've got one Wednesday, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
I'm going to say you have a very clear example of how the businesses can show up for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, at the conference this past week, I got on stage with Katy, the lawyer that's helped me navigate all of these regulation issues, which is
Who's
included.
going to be a board member of MiSTRA.
Who is going to be aboard. Thank God.
Bringing her on board, literally.
Yes, she is. She's incredible. And I was telling Carrie before this, I'm like, Katy is so lawyer. She's so black and white, and I so live in the gray. So like having her in my corner has just been incredible. But I mean, that was her advice to me when we were going through the situation with Cadillac, because the city of Cadillac had so many people that were complaining about being next to a crappy Airbnb. And so the really loud members that came and spoke out against short-term rentals were people who had crappy hosts with a big house right next to them, and they were throwing parties constantly, and it was ruining the environment of that neighborhood. And like, yeah, I don't like them either, right? Like, if I was somebody who was living next to that, like, I would be complaining alongside everybody else who's complaining. But that's not the operation that we ran. You know, we ran it for a year and a half, and no police were ever called, and no noise complaints were ever made, and we kept in contact with our neighbors. And so when you do have a professionally run Airbnb, speaking from experience, it's like, I went and spoke in front of the DDA in Cadillac, and all of the business owners were like, oh, we get so much business from your Airbnb. Like, they always mention they're staying at the Big Orange House. And so it's just because it's big and orange, it just creates that conversation so that it was very obvious for the business owners. And all the neighbors were in support of it as well. So I just think like Airbnbs make such a positive impact on communities, but they also can make a very negative one. And I'm in agreement with you guys. Like, professionalizing it is the way to go in a way that still serves the communities, the businesses in these middle of nowhere towns that we are bringing tourists to thrive now by having the extra business. But if they've got crappy hosts with crappy guests in the middle of a neighborhood, like, nobody wants that.
Well, to focus on all of the other people that you employ and support. And I know that that was your case too with the cleaners and handymen and...
Yeah. It was overwhelming seeing how many people showed up to that final meeting where I just was like, if this business has positively impacted you at all, please show up. And everybody, all the neighbors, all of my employees, all of the local business owners, the planning commission, the zoning, like everyone showed up to just be like, if it's done well, it makes such a positive impact on our city. So, but
that's such an important strategy, and I think that people forget about that. It's a business that affects more than just the host.
Yeah, and I think that the one thing that really played in my favor is coming in with honey, not vinegar. You know, like coming in and being like, look, I desperately want to be a contributing member of this community. I'm not a faraway investor that like doesn't give a crap. You know, like I'm partnering with these businesses, and so. Yeah, my advice to anyone who is going through a situation with regulation in their township in Michigan is to not come with pitchforks and try and escalate the situation. Like, you are not going to win that war at all.
And I think, you know, if anyone listening to this takes something away, earlier is better. And again, there's a lot of municipalities out there. Like, just if you're not plugged into your community, like sign up to get email notices from your local government, or set up a Google search if you know, because they have to post when a meeting is being held on a certain topic. And I think that, you know, because a lot of times you're showing up with a pitchfork because they've proposed something that doesn't work, that doesn't make sense for what we're working on. And that's in large part because they didn't have an Emily showing up to tell them like, well, that doesn't really make sense, or that doesn't, you know, I mean, I can't tell you how many township meetings I've shown up and I'm like, you know, Airbnb actually prohibits parties.
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't know that.
Right. And why would they?
You know? Yeah. Like, you know, no, we agree. Like, we don't think you should be like having these ravers at an Airbnb in the middle of your community either.
Right.
Right. But I think that would be a big takeaway, would be like, just get plugged in. And the other side of that, though, is like one of our other board members, Jamie, and she is tracking 17 communities.
Wow.
because that's part of her job, right? As having a vacation rental management business. But that's a lot to track, right?
I track 3 right now, and that's
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah, me too.
Well, and to add on to that, even if you have regulation currently set up and there's certain amount of permits and you think everything's good, I've had 2 of my townships change those. So I feel like that was my message at our meetup after the conference was like, even if it's not happening to you right now, there could be a chance that it does. And I think that that is why, again, so important to join an organization like MiSTRA is so that you can be clued in. So I know there's one of the things that are happening is deed restrictions.
Yeah.
And so knowing that that's happened to someone else, like we don't want to just say like that's happening to Sarah, like good luck, Sarah, like hope you do good. Like we know that if that could then also affect other people. So same thing with townships and seeing the changes that they're making. Another township could say like, okay, I'm going to apply this. So I think it's really important that I say that MiSTRA isn't Kate and Jen that started this. It's not us as board members. Like MiSTRA is all of us, like all of the hosts in Michigan. And again, the more we can get on board and the more voices, and especially if you don't maybe like what direction we're going, or you want to tweak our voice, we need all of us together to form that.
Yeah.
I just, as a cautionary tale, a lot of particularly smaller communities who hadn't yet put anything into place last year because there was this big bill and it was going to have a registry component and all these, and so they put it on pause. What we're definitely seeing is those communities are now moving forward.
Yep.
All at once.
All at once.
Literally all at once. All
Yep.
at once. So I think it's really important because at our March meetup where we had Rent Responsibly come in, and they said there's been a 405% increase in regulatory and legislative activity on short-term rentals across the United States. And I feel every 405%
Yes.
of that in Michigan.
Same.
Yeah, I think
And I think, Katy, maybe you could tell us what's coming legislatively for this
where we
year, if
at?
anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Expedia and Airbnb are both interested in a proactive approach. We are too. We've engaged with the Michigan Realtors Association. They proposed a bill years ago that did not go over well and did not go through. It was essentially limiting local control in a way that made a lot of people uncomfortable. I mean, even us, we've been at the table in all of these communities, helping them develop these policies, and then to say that they can't do that in their own communities did not make sense for us either. But so the realtors are going to come back to the table, Expedia, Airbnb, us, and we would really, really like to get the Michigan Municipal League on board and at the table. They were definitely a proponent of the previous bill, but I think that we had not had enough conversations with them for them to understand that how important it is to MiSTRA that our local communities are taken care of.
Yeah.
And it's very important to us that if we are being taxed in some way, that money goes back to the infrastructure in our communities to promote the longevity of tourism in our communities, to make sure that just economic development as a whole, because especially when you're in a smaller rural community, a lot of your taxes can end up going to Lansing, and they tend to go to Grand Rapids and Detroit, the bulk of it. So we want to make sure that all of these communities that have active tourism economies are being given the infrastructure support that they need to continue that moving forward.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, that was a big conversation piece in Cadillac when they were developing regulation, is like, how do we, benefit from this in some way other than the guests who are staying here are spending money at businesses. And I'm like, look, tax it at a local level, right? But at a state level, I don't want it both.
Yeah, and it's complicated in the state of Michigan because of the way that our tax law is written. And so then when we get into the weeds and like statewide policy and how to best move forward with this, now all of a sudden, we're looking at Michigan tax code and it's like, this is so out of our element, but we're doing the best that we can. So we are looking at other states, like Kate said. We try to model after what they're doing and what works. North Carolina is a great example. They have I think it's a 6% tax, and then 3% goes back to the municipality from whence it came, which makes a lot of sense to us. 2% goes to their beach nourishment fund, and then 1% goes to their CVBs for marketing purposes. And it's like that's a split that makes a little more sense. And I'm not saying like that exact model, but Michigan does not have to rewrite everything themselves. Like we can look at our neighbors and other tourist economies and see what has been working for decades in these communities.
Yeah.
No need to reinvent the wheel. So that's kind of what we're going to be pushing for in Lansing moving forward.
I love that. Just like we're trying to provide the townships regulation that's not just their neighbors. Same thing looking at other states. I think that's so smart. Oh.
And also empowering. I love that. I know that Emily was really nervous to go to Lansing and just the whole process of it. And I know I was the first time I went, and then I could help you. So the more that we can do that, because it really isn't that intimidating once you go through that process. And I think it feels empowering. I just remember after you just had this switch where you were empowered by that.
I do feel like a lot of this is lack of education on both sides too. And so you guys kind of educating both the townships and the people who don't understand it is super important, because we've been talking about this a lot, because obviously with Sarah's situations, regulation is just a huge topic, but it feels like it's the thing in Michigan right now. It happened in New York. It had to have happened in Arizona before they had their state regulation. And so it's it's a big topic, and it seems like it's blowing up now, and I feel like it will fizzle out. It's just getting people educated at this point, but it really is about not just educating the hosts on what the options they could bring to the table, but educating the townships as to what really would make sense and how people should be hosting and what standards need to be, because a lot of them have no clue anything that's even available or how anything operates at all.
I think it's important to show these communities how they can leverage this industry. Mm-hmm. This is a $1 billion industry in the state of Michigan that has been largely overlooked as far as using it as an economic development tool. And so moving forward in our quest for, being recognized as a professional industry, that's going to be a big part of it as well.
Yeah. And Alpena specifically, it was they were please don't turn us into Traverse City. And I was it doesn't have to be that.
We love hearing that.
But also I'm my response back was you guys don't want the tourist money that Traverse City gets. This town shuts down for half the year because there's people that your businesses aren't getting money because you're not really pursuing people coming here. And it's such a cool place. And so when they say that, I'm okay, there's got to be a middle ground here, because if you guys want to expand at all, they're not open to that. And I was okay, we need this needs to be a bigger discussion with you guys, because they're just not seeing it in the way that I think is realistic.
Well, I don't think a lot of the city council members want the cities to grow or townships to grow.
Correct.
I think they want them to be exactly like they were when they started living there.
Yeah. But the businesses, I go in and I shop at the baby clothes store in Alpena every single time I'm there. And they're always oh my gosh, we love seeing you here. We're so busy in the summer, but they're not busy at all in the winter. And I'm because you guys are not encouraging people to come here. And now, because my rentals there, I have more people that are coming there in the winter because we have the amenities and things like that.
Well, and that's part of it. I think all of us, especially with social media, are promoting our places.
Yeah.
And we want that winter business. So we are promoting so much on social media. And I know even through TikTok, it's people are, and Instagram, people are finding these places that they want to go in these areas.
Yeah.
And Traverse City, yes, is more well known, but I still get people that are I've never been before. Tell me what to do, and really rely on us to do that. And I know that you guys invest in places where people don't normally go. Mm-hmm. So you're having to work extra hard to promote all of the things to do in all the seasons. You're not just focused on the summer. So I do think that gets overlooked as well. We basically are doing free marketing for our areas.
And it's not just the tourism economy. Michigan as a state is growing. People are moving back to Michigan. People are very interested, particularly post-COVID. We saw a lot of East Coast, West Coast money come into the state, which is great. So again, how do we capitalize on that? Not just even from a short-term rental aspect, but from economic development in general, because they're coming anyway. So if we don't accommodate, it's going to squeeze and feel very tight if we don't set ourselves up for this growth.
Yeah.
I think that's a very important point. Like, I think we get looked at like we're bringing all of these people here. We're just a response to that.
Yeah. Well, in my perspective too, it's like in dealing with Cadillac in particular, and now like thinking about every market that I'm in, or really like my own travel patterns. I'm sorry, but there's just not very many aesthetic or cute hotels in Michigan. Like, I'm traveling B&B not because I'm choosing B&B over a hotel, but because the B&Bs are better. You know, they're more professional, they're outfitted with better amenities, they're more modern, they're not, I mean, all of the hotels up north look like grandma and grandpa's house.
Well,
you know?
there's not very, like on Leelanau Peninsula, there's not that many, there's
Nothing.
actually no hotels. There's like very few motels and resorts. So that's probably the most popular place to get married.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those people are going back into Traverse City and staying at a hotel because that's all they have. So there just isn't. And also, just to touch on that a little bit, it's like, I think Airbnb and the promotion of that has shined a lot of light on it. But up in Northport, which is 45 minutes north of Traverse City, like they have been known forever for hosting people because they didn't have those spaces. So people were renting out their homes. They just promoted it in the local magazine or paper.
Yeah.
I think recognizing that people are traveling differently and they really want their entire group, particularly multi-generational families, all under the same roof and to enjoy that together. And I think, you know, we have the opportunity to share our state and kind of facilitate in memory making. And I think that people forget that that's what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful thing. So we just need to figure out the best way to accommodate it.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, you make a great point of like, you know, we have professionalized internally, but when they're dealing with it at a state level or at a township or community level, like no one is going to have the same motivation as us to have a healthy conversation around how to make this work. And if we're not at the table in a professional way, in an organized way, then why wouldn't their decision just be like, well, just squash it? You know, you've got a gazillion other things that they are worried about on top of ours. Like if it's not organized and professional, they're just going to have a bunch of side hustle mentality people screaming at them with pitchforks, and then it's never going to get anywhere productive. So join MiSTRA if you're listening to
Love
this.
that message.
We'll wrap that up with a bow. Join MiSTRA.
For the love of God, join MiSTRA. So what can people anticipate? I mean, I know you guys are talking about how right now there's not enough people, you know, you're just at the beginning stages of getting this thing off the ground and the board is still a working board. If people were to join, what are their options on getting involved? If they want to join and support, but they don't have the time to dedicate to it, what does that look like? Like, what are their options in getting involved from both a time consumption standpoint and also, you know, how much does it cost? You know, what are their options?
Yeah, time, talent, and treasure, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. So we are, so our membership are hosts, folks who'd like to be hosting, property managers, and businesses who want to support the work that we're doing and potentially get some, you know, access to folks who might be interested in their services certainly as well, right? Yeah. And so we're, you know, actively looking for, and we've been fairly successful in our first year here of just having folks who are willing to show up at the table. We just started our call for what we call it our advocacy council. So we're actually going to have designated regional liaisons. So as we go back to this idea of structure, like every region in the state, we're going to have one or two people who are sort of responsible to help ferret information to sort of the parent advocacy council and our advocacy and legislative affairs. So we can understand as we're working at the state level what those local pinch points are, but also that they can take strategy that we're seeing and collectively and bringing that back to the local level. And then Carrie alluded earlier as well that we're just starting our community hubs. And so that's just really having a designated leader in various communities who's going to facilitate in-person meetups. Mm-hmm. And again, just another way to facilitate that back and forth community and that really important in-person, you know, connection and all of that. So those are positions, if you will, volunteer positions that are available. But at the end of the day, coming in and becoming a member means you get access to information. We have a monthly open forum around advocacy and legislative affairs. So basically, you just come in, you get Katy, and you get Jess, who's heading up our advocacy stuff, and usually many of the rest of us, to just talk about what's going on in your communities, and we can problem solve and we can share information. And we have a tracker right now that we're trying to keep track of where are the issues while we get to the point of building out like an actual database.
Yeah, we want to make sure that people know what's happening before it gets to that like critical hour. And that ALAC committee meeting every month is an opportunity for us to update. And then also to hear what else is going on around the state and try to brainstorm and give them advocacy tools to help them help themselves in their community. And then when MiSTRA needs to step in, we're happy to do that as well. We're always here to support.
And we're typically as well, so we're working on, we have a number of tools now, an advocacy handbook that just sort of walks through some of the basics. We have an inspection checklist, so even if your municipality doesn't require hey, you shouldn't have candles all over your Airbnb, right? You need to make sure you have handwritten, just based on Michigan residential building codes and fire and safety codes. We have I think it's a 7-page checklist. So you can make sure that you're providing a safe space with some best practices in there around short-term rentals.
And it's nice to be able to take those back to those meetings where they are trying to regulate, and you say, look how professional we are.
Yeah.
These are those steps that we're taking to make sure it's safe.
And then we're also working on, one of the benefits I think of us as an organization is when, as an example, I had a newly elected township supervisor call, and it was in a township that has struggled with what to do with them, and they're like, we will pay you to consult and help us, right? And that's a really help. They were recognizing we're subject matter experts. We're not coming in and being prescriptive about, this is what you should do, because every community needs to make that decision. But we can sort of flag legally risky decisions. We can point to the maybe unintended consequences. We can point to resources they have and kind of maybe cut through some of the noise and be helpful. And our members can ask us to get involved. They can ask us for letters of support. So we're still growing. We're still figuring it out. But, our lowest level of membership would be for somebody who just wants to get a newsletter, and they really just want to recognize that other people are doing this on their behalf. And so those, we call them allies, because they're not true members. And then from there, our annual membership, I think, is $249. Okay. And then if you're coming in and you represent, hundreds of properties, you might pay a little bit more than that. And then our goal is really that we want to represent, at least half of all the, right now, 34,000 short-term rentals in the state, over in the next 5 years. And we've already, I think, exceeded our 1-year goal.
Oh yeah, I think Jen said I would have said 50, and I think we're of members.
Because I think we represent at least 1,000 short-term rentals across our membership right now.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So that, I think I wanted to just reiterate the point, because I know we're pushing a lot of help, but most people that join are not then jumping on a committee and a board, and there's no expectation of that. Just the fact that you are a member helps us out so much, and even if you are not able to do that, the monthly meetups are free. And we encourage you to just come on them. And that is one step to getting involved and sharing our stuff. And then also for the ally membership, a lot of times Katy has all of her owners that's their investment. And so they want to protect that. So they're not necessarily, they're obviously paying her to be in the loop with all that stuff, but they still want to show support. So this is a way that they can show support for it as well. So I definitely encourage, if you're kind of still want to know what we're about and kind of experience it firsthand, definitely go on one of those first Wednesdays of every month, noon to 1. This summer, we're not, as of right now, going to have an actual set, a program, but I think we're going to do more of virtual meetup happy hour, and I don't know if everyone's looking at me. I don't know. Jen and I were talking because we're all so busy. Summer's our busiest time, but we don't want to completely lose touch with each other because sometimes that's the time we need support the most. So we want to be able to offer that to say, hey, come hang out, complain about a guest, complain about an owner, ask questions, and just be there for each other. So that's going to be for the summer, and then we'll start back up in the fall with doing programming and, like Kate said, our virtual summit, which we're really excited about. We had a panel discussion months ago, and that was like our most well-attended. We had so many people sign up, which was amazing because that helps build our email list, and then had a lot of people join as well. And
Yeah, that one was incredible. I was moderating the panel portion of that, and I was really expecting like maybe 30 people, and we had over 600 registered.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, I wasn't nervous until
You saw the count in the Zoom call.
For being a new organization, I think like that is the benefit of being knowing what other people are doing, because it kind of helps. Like, we're all very ambitious people.
Yep.
And so we are like, oh, we should be doing more, and we don't have enough members. And then to be able to like compare ourselves to the other states and be like, okay, we're still new. And
I do sometimes think about the fact that in the greater Orlando area, there's like 30,000 short-term rentals.
Yeah.
And in the entire state of Michigan, we're at like 34,000, the entire state.
Yeah. Yeah. We're little babies
Yeah.
in comparison to some of those markets. But I do think, I mean, you know, as to people who offer mentorship to people who are interested in getting involved in the space, it's like one of the questions at the conference was like, do you have to pay an outrageous amount for getting plugged in with the community? And the answer is no, right? Like, this would be a fantastic area for people to get plugged into if they were an aspiring host, if they're an existing host looking to grow their business or property manager or whatever else. Like, there is no better business to be had than business that's in your backyard. And so I just think that, one, like, if you're listening to this and you don't have the time to dedicate to helping grow this, like, from a selfish standpoint where you are sitting, like, this could be a huge advantage to your business by joining and being in community with people who are in the same industry as you in the state. And then one thing that, was it Jen that pointed it out at the conference, or maybe she was already gone, and I don't know the lady's name who pointed it out, but when
I think Sue. Are you talking about the logo and the trusted?
Yes. She was saying that there's a spot on your Airbnb listing that you can mark MiSTRA as a professional community that you're a part of or something, and it professionalizes your Airbnb listing as well. And for me, I was like, say less. I'm doing that immediately. Like,
yeah,
that's
we
worth
send
it.
out a logo with that, and you can put it on your website. And I do feel like when we're looking long term, and I think we've already are getting that respect really early on, which is awesome. But I think that would be for us is like, we are the short-term rental association. We are the only one in Michigan. We're trusted. People see that. They just know what that means without having any other explanation and not having to listen to a podcast. So I think for us, we've already we've already been invited to tables that I'm like, wow, we've already been invited before I thought that we would be. So I can only imagine what we'll be as we continue to grow. And there are already these people that, like I was in Traverse City before I got involved with MiSTRA. Like, I was holding up meetings with other hosts because I knew the importance of it. And there are those other communities that are already doing that don't necessarily know about MiSTRA. And we want to help band together and not take away from what they're doing, but add to that. So I think that that's a really exciting thing for us now, is to focus on that. And when we're talking about the community hubs, it's like, who are those leaders that are already there? I mean, that's how we got with you guys. Like, we know that you're a leader in the space, and especially in Michigan. So being able to connect, tell you what we're all about, and then it's easy for you to then speak about us, because you're like, okay, I get it, and that makes sense, and I want to, tell everyone that we know about it.
Yeah, because I don't want anyone to solo go through the pain of regulation changes that I've gone through. I'm like, somebody help. I'm drowning.
And that's the one cool, we have a committee member that came on, and I asked her, why she wanted to get involved, and it was just such an impactful story from her perspective, because when her township was going through regulation, she had a full-time job and did not have any time to commit. And she remembers this one woman that fought for them, and now she's giving back. And it just is so touching that she's now dedicating her time to be a very important committee member on MiSTRA because she now has the time to do it and the skills, basically paying forward what happened to her. And I just think that that's so cool. And I think that that is a story, you know, we all have that. Either we've been through something, we don't want someone else to go through it alone, or we've watched someone else fight for us, and then now we've had that time to dedicate for it. So I do think that there's always an opportunity for you, no matter where you are in that journey as a host. Because like you said, a lot of us are side hustling this still, and it does feel very lonely, and you might not have the time, but there's always going to be time at some point. So even if you can get involved a little bit now, and then when the time frees up, maybe you'll be able to give back a little bit more.
Trailblazing means making it easier for the next person behind you, right? So it's been a wild ride so far, but it's been a lot of fun, and we've met some incredible people. And so I would just encourage people to hop on this train because we've got some momentum, and we're ready to make some pretty big changes here in Michigan.
Yeah, I love that. Well, any final questions from you?
I don't think so. I think join MiSTRA. I think we wrap.
Literally, join MiSTRA. If you want to hang out with us, we
Kate, do you want to talk to them a little bit about where they can find us?
Yes, please.
Oh, well, we're growing. We'll take any social media expertise we can get anyways, right? Because I think we're on Facebook and LinkedIn and at michiganstra.org.
Okay.
Is the best ways to find us. But if you just search on Michigan Short-Term Rental Association, you will find us.
Yes. And we will, of course, have all of you guys' information linked underneath of the YouTube video, the podcast episodes, the Instagram and TikTok reels and things like that.
I feel like we just got cooler.
I'm sure we did.
Right? You guys are on a podcast.
Making regulations seem cool.
Yeah, literally.
You make T-shirts.
Yeah, and I feel like I have solved quite a few of my problems behind this microphone when it comes to regulation because it's the easiest way to get the news out. Like when I was at the conference and I asked, I was on a panel with Katy to talk about regulation, and I was like, in a room of 300 people that I didn't know, and I asked them to raise their hand if they were up to date on my regulation drama, and literally 80% of the room raised their hand. And I was like, whoa, you can tell that Michigan is craving that community in the STR space because we're just two girls making it up, right? Like there's very little professionalism on our end of we are new entrepreneurs. We, are not necessarily the people to be looking to as the golden standard, but there just isn't that community in Michigan, or hasn't been for a very long time, for this industry. And I think people are very desperate for it because it is an industry that's now professionalizing, and people are relying on this income for their day-to-day. It's not something that they're just doing when they're not at their vacation home. And so I just appreciate the work that you guys are doing so much because, it has been a bloodbath in this state in particular when it comes to getting community together to fight the good fight, to make sure that this is an established, professionalized industry. So, for everyone listening, if you're not a member of MiSTRA, for the love of God, please join us. Please join us so that we can make sure that this industry gets to stay here in Michigan and doesn't get wiped out. But ladies, I appreciate you all so much for coming on. I appreciate the work that you guys are doing, and we're right alongside you, making sure that this industry gets to stay the way that it is in this state, or at least get better and not worse. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having us. This is fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
And for our listeners, we will catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.